Hey, everybody. Welcome to Sheltering in Place. I am going to wait just a minute or two before we start. Get everyone settled. Everyone's filing in. Let me get my screens all figured out. Fantastic. Okay. Just getting everything settled together. Hey, Helen. There we go. Okay. All right. So welcome to Sheltering in Place, staying healthy while sheltering in place. So we are doing a webinar today, and I had asked a bunch of folks to fill out an online survey to find out what you all were struggling with. And I have to say, I got so much amazing feedback. And so what I wanted to do was, I know that a lot of us are really hurting right now. We're really struggling with what's going on in the world. And I have some information for you that hopefully will allow you to get through the process. So what I'm going to do is let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. And let's see, where are we? There we go, I think. All right. I think I did it right. Excuse me, 1 minute, more minutes while I make sure that I have everything right. I do. Okay. Perfect. Let's put that there. Okay. All right. All right. So welcome to Staying Healthy While Sheltering in Place. So you are in the right place if you're feeling a general sense of anxiety, whether it's from sheltering in place, whether it's from the virus itself, the financial markets, or if you're watching the news too much, or maybe even scrolling social media. So the other reason you're right in the right place is, and thank you, Ryan, you you distracted me. If you find yourself feeling unmotivated to exercise, maybe to eat right, or possibly even to get up in the morning. I know that I've seen a lot of that folks are really feeling a lot of dread, like what's the point? If you're eating more than normal, or if you're having trouble sleeping, whether that's going to sleep or staying asleep, okay, or any other negative stress related response to our current circumstances. So you're in the right place if you're experiencing any of that. So in the next 60 minutes, you are going to learn 3 major reasons why you're responding to the world as you are, and get my strategy on how to manage sheltering in place without losing it. Whether that losing it is your cool, losing your family, losing your sanity, your body, or anything else, and emerge better than before, because it is possible for us to take this thing that we're all collectively going through and come out of it better on the other side. Because right now, a lot of us are absolutely struggling. So I would encourage you to stay to the end, because I do have a special opportunity. Now, again, I mentioned before that there was so much amazing feedback that I got from the surveys, and I unfortunately couldn't include all of it. It took me so long to put this webinar together because I really had to pare down. There was so much that I wanted to cover. So if it's possible that I didn't cover things that you need, there's going to be an opportunity for you to get more information at the end. Okay. So I do have one request though. Please be present and eliminate distractions. I know how easy it is to be multitasking, to scroll Facebook while you're listening to me. And I know that when I do those things, I don't pay attention to either one very well. And so I miss all of it and I don't get any value out of all of it. So please close down social, or if you're watching TV, and really just pay attention. I appreciate it. Feel free to ask questions. So I do have the chat box open. I can answer questions as we go along or at the end. And then the other thing is I would love for you to keep an open mind. So I know that a lot of this material is actually going to be very familiar to many of you. There's nothing new going on in health and fitness and stress management. However, if you find yourself thinking, I already know this, what I'd really encourage you to do is change that to, am I applying this? And if I'm not, how can I? Okay. So that's the first thing. The second thing is thinking this doesn't apply to me. And so what I would encourage you to do is change that thought to, how can I use this to be better or to my life? How can I apply this to my life? And the other thing is, I was just talking to a client of mine about this. Sometimes we really need to hear things over and over and over again in order to get something out of them. And there's a style of yoga called Bikram yoga. And in the class, they say the same things, you do the same postures. But I remember when I was doing that class, that every time I would pick up something different, even though it was the same script. So keep an open mind, because you might learn something new. You might learn how to apply these concepts to your life, considering that we are in a different phase. We've never done something like this before. So therefore, we might be able to apply things a little bit differently. Now, I've also tried to eliminate distractions, but be aware that I do have 2 dogs. So if you hear dogs barking in the background, I would love to tell you that there was something I could do about it, but sometimes my dogs just bark, and my husband's supposed to be keeping track of them. But if someone shows up at the house, you might hear that. Okay. Now, let me introduce myself. I am Elizabeth Sherman. I am a life and weight loss coach. And so what that means is I focus on eating, moving, sleep management, stress management, and body image with my clients. So I help folks improve their health by focusing on those different areas. Okay. I've been a coach for over 15 years. I have tons of certifications in nutrition, in personal training, in habit change, as well as life coaching. And what I like to do is I like to focus on habits, skills, and beliefs with my clients so that we can overcome those things that are really important to them. And we're going to get a little bit more into that today. Okay. I like to help them create easy to do, sustainable habits that ultimately add up over time. Now, if you haven't been with me before, you will know that you won't know that I wasn't always healthy. Okay. In 2001, my mom passed away from breast cancer. And at the time, I was the vice president of a software company. I was traveling a lot. I was eating out. I didn't exercise. And I was totally high stressed. My mom's death due to breast cancer was a huge wake-up call for me, because I saw that if I didn't make some changes in my own life, that I was headed down the exact same path that she was. And to watch that disease overtake her body and her life was really impactful for me. And so what I chose to do was change my life, and it actually through my own pursuit of better health, it allowed me to want to help other people. So it is my purpose that if I can help just one person avoid a lifestyle related disease, I will have done my job on this earth. Okay. But even though I started taking my care of myself, my physical health 15 years ago, and I struggled to manage my weight and health, but only in the past not 3 years, but only in the past like 5 years did I really get my eating and everything under control. And it wasn't until about 3 years ago that I realized that there was another component that I really wasn't paying attention to. But I'm going to tell you more about that as we progress through the webinar. Okay. So after 15 years of helping folks, I've discovered that it's all connected, body and mind, that there's more to health than just eating and exercise. And the way that we think is just as important as the actions that we take. And that's really the piece that I was missing. So I would like you to think about, I'd like you to fantasize, visualize for just a second. What could sheltering in place feel like? What could it feel like physically for you? What could it be like mentally? And what could it be like emotionally? Right now, I'm sensing that a lot of us are feeling really caged up, that we mentally are, I keep hearing that we're not meant to do this, that we're not meant to stay in one place at the same time, that we're meant to be social creatures. And yes, that is true. But, how do we want to take this time that we have? We've been given a gift of X number of weeks of slowing things down. How do we want to feel at the end of that? What do we want to be doing? And how do you want to show up for yourself and for your family? Can you see how setting an intention like that for our self-quarantining could help shift some of the stress that you're feeling? With this as well. And the things that we're going to be talking about today are ways that I have learned to manage it myself. Okay, so the 3 secrets that I'm going to be going over today, number 1 is the number 1 habit to focus on that will help everything else to click together. Okay, how to take back control so that you don't feel so powerless, because I think that that's a lot of what our stress is going on, is we feel powerless. We've been told to shelter in place. We have this virus, this global pandemic that is coming towards us, and we feel powerless to stop it. And then understanding, number 3, is understanding that the solution lies with each of us. Okay, so let's move on to secret number 1. Okay, so the number 1 habit that will put everything else together and help you click. So lifestyle habits. As a health coach, I work with folks in the areas of sleep, their nutrition, their exercise, their stress management, and then their mindset, how we think about all of those things. And it's really important to know that they are all connected. So when we talk about eating, we also know that our eating is impacted by our stress. Our eating is also impacted by our sleep, and our eating is also impacted by our exercise, or vice versa. So how that all kind of goes together is that when we're feeling stressed out, we gravitate towards eating. Okay. Of course, that's not any, mind-blowing thing. But the foods that we choose will also impact how we respond to our stress. Okay. So eat really nutritious food, and you'll be able to manage your stress better because you'll feel better. Now, eating and sleep go together because if you eat too close to bedtime, then you might not have a restful night's sleep. Of course, if you don't sleep well, you'll also notice that you go for starchy, carby foods. Okay. And that's actually a fact. Same thing goes for movement, right? So if you eat too much, you're going to feel lethargic and you're not going to feel like moving. And if you move in the wrong ways, then that can also impact your eating habits as well. So that's just one example of how these are all connected. I'm going to go through them more within the webinar. But be aware that how we think about each of these components is all, our mindset about them also impacts how we choose to eat or manage our stress or sleep or movement. So how we think about those things will also impact how we take care of ourselves. Okay. So now here's the thing is that we think sometimes, like myself, that we have all of this handled. But what happens when crisis hits or when stress hits is that we think we have everything handled, but then when stress hits, we automatically start to have poor sleep. Okay. When we have poor sleep, we end up tired. And when we're tired, we don't exercise. And so when we don't exercise, we make poor food choices. And then we feel terrible. And then we think that alcohol will make it feel better. And so we end up wired but tired at the end of the day because we haven't exercised, we've eaten too much, and we've been drinking alcohol. And so this cycle keeps perpetuating. And so all of those habits that I was talking about, eating, sleeping, stress management, and eating, sleeping, stress management, and our diet, they're all connected. And so when we start to do one poorly, they all kind of go downhill. But the thing is that when we do one well, we can build up again. They're just four pillars of our health. Okay. And so we think that when we have our habits dialed in, that everything's going to be okay. But there's always a crisis going on. The difference right now is that we are all experiencing the crisis at the same time. Okay. So be aware that sometimes we have crises, but we're just not experiencing them with other people. And so if there's one key concept that I would like you to get out of today's presentation, it's that the reason that we do anything and everything has to do with this concept called the motivational triad. Okay, and I'm going to talk about it a lot more in the presentation, but for right now, I just wanted to introduce it to you. So the motivational triad is that our brain is wired to seek pleasure, to avoid pain, and do it as fast as possible. Okay. So that's the motivational triad. So if you think about the way that our brain works, we actually have two different parts of our brain that I'm going to introduce you to. We have what I call the rational brain, and we have what's called the emotional brain. So the rational brain is the part of our brain that thinks about our future. It plans out our goals. It creates a plan. It thinks about others and how our actions impact them. And it makes decisions based on facts and facts alone. The emotional brain is kind of like a toddler. So the emotional brain only thinks about right here and now. Okay. It doesn't care about our goals. It only wants to keep us safe. It doesn't give a rat's ass about our plan and what we're supposed to be doing. It only lives for right now. And it makes decisions based on emotion, desire, and it only thinks about ourselves. I want it and I want it now. Okay. So you can see how all of our different habits or all of our different lifestyle factors key into this. Okay. So like, for example, eating is very pleasurable. Okay. So when we're avoiding pain, when we're avoiding emotional pain, it makes total sense that we would seek pleasure in eating or in drinking. And we know that whatever as fast as possible is going to feed that. Okay. So now, as a health coach, um, I like to teach stress management to my clients, but it's always, I don't want to say it's eluded me, but it's always been really difficult for me to teach stress management. I mean, how do you do that? And I've always felt really inauthentic teaching stress management, because when you Google how to manage your stress, what you'll see is slews of articles about meditation or baths and candles and essential oils and manicures, pedicures, and massages. And don't get me wrong, all of those things are fantastic and they're wonderful. But because I've always felt like those were very after the fact types of responses. Because stress isn't as tangible as eating or exercises, sleep, and we don't really get good feedback about whether we're doing it right, it's always been really, really difficult for me to manage that with my clients. So this is a comment that I got off of the survey. I miss our normal schedule and I feel like my sleep is all off. I'm missing the regular downtime in the evening, and there's just no closure to moments throughout the day because there's constant noise. I can't quite verbalize it, but I just feel off. And so the first thing that I want to suggest in this first secret, the number one habit that we want to focus on that's going to make everything else click is our sleep. Now, stress and sleep have a very symbiotic relationship, okay? And kind of an adversarial relationship at the same time. So I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But when we have a lack of sleep, okay, what happens is we definitely have stress problems. So there's numbers of studies that show that if we don't get enough sleep, our body will not manage our energy correctly. And so what happens is we'll actually start to see signs of diabetes. We'll have a higher A1C marker than normal. We'll see rising blood glucose measures as well. We'll feel lethargic. We'll feel less likely to exercise. We're going to have brain fog and probably a short fuse too, right? So here we're already seeing that if I don't get enough sleep, I'm probably going to be a little bit more stress reactive. And when we're stress reactive, we don't sleep very well. When we don't get enough sleep, we also don't make good choices as far as eating is concerned. And we get the mid-afternoon munchies because of that. When we don't sleep well, we also don't have the energy to exercise. And as far as our mindset is concerned, we're moody, we're less productive, and we have less focus. This is one of my favorite cartoons. It's an artist named The Awkward Yeti. And I think that this is so perfect, right? It's something that we've all gone through, where we're waking up in the middle of the night, or we're awake and not able to get to in the middle of the night. And we're thinking about all of these problems that we have. And we're not able to solve our problems at 3 o'clock in the morning, okay? Stress keeps us awake at night, but stress also helps us, sleep also helps us deal with our problems better, okay? So what are some better sleep tips? The first one is create a sleep routine, okay? So it doesn't have to be complex. It just has to be a series of habits that you do before bedtime that signal to the brain that you're getting ready to go to sleep, okay? Number 2 is practice good sleep hygiene. So make sure that your room temperature is cool. They say that around 68 degrees is the ideal temperature to be sleeping. Make sure that your environment is clutter-free, that you don't have workout equipment in there or office equipment. Make sure that it's dark. Okay, so room darkening shades is perfect. Also, notice a relationship between your eating and sleep. I know that with a number of my clients, when they have insomnia, if we change their eating just a little bit, they won't wake up in the middle of the night or they won't have night sweats. So be aware that the amount of food that you're eating may interact or may interrupt your sleep, and also the time between when you're going to sleep and you eat your last meal could also have an impact. If you're finding that you are wired but tired at the end of the night, and that what that means is that your brain is spinning, but you're kind of tired at the same time. What I would invite you to do is do more exercise, not necessarily lifting weights or cardio or anything like that, but just walking. So tiring the body out. Okay. And the other thing I want to suggest is really paying attention to your thought process before you go to bed. So perhaps you could do a brain dump before you go to bed. List out all of the things that you have to think about, okay? So that they're not keeping you in mind in the middle of the night. Review your schedule for the next day so that you make sure that you're prepared. Or practice visualization exercises if you wake up in the middle of the night or you can't get to sleep. And I have a bunch of those. You can reach out to me for that. So secret number 2 is, I can't read it. What is our secret? Oh, how to take back control. Excuse me. Okay, so this is another comment from the survey. I think I'm not letting myself go down the path of PJs all day because for me, that's a road to deep depression. So I think I'm just holding it together. So I think that this is something that a lot of us has struggled with. And it's funny for me, I've worked from home for the past 15 years. And even though I work from home when I live in Mexico, my life really has not changed a lot since the sheltering in place. I did find myself during those first 2 weeks not feeling like exercising very much and feeling like, why should I want to do this? And so I think that as a society, we are completely overscheduled and run down, that we invite breaks whenever we can get them. And so when we were ordered to shelter in place, I think a lot of us breathed a sigh of relief. No more commuting, no more overscheduled activities and things like that. So, it was kind of like a summer vacation for a lot of us. And so what's really going on here? So there are 3 different things that I want to go through. One is the stages of grief. Number 2 is what I call the vacation effect. And number 3, I want to go through how our brain is heightened in terms of perceiving danger and what it's doing to help keep us safe. Okay. So our stages of grief. And I've noticed that through the process, we're all in different stages, and we're all getting to that piece of acceptance. And I think that piece of acceptance of not wanting to believe or fighting with reality is what's causing us a lot of stress. I feel like a lot of us have this thought in our head that this should not be happening. I should be able to go to the grocery store if I want to. I should be able to go out and see my friends. And so arguing with reality is really creating a lot of grief in our lives. The second piece to that is the vacation effect. And I saw this a lot with my clients when summer vacation would come around, that they were like, oh my God, this is amazing. I don't have to schedule anything anymore. And so what happens is Their eating would suffer because they didn't have to be as regimented with their schedule. So they didn't really have to plan, they had more time, so they didn't really have to plan everything out like they did during the school year. And so by not planning meals in favor of grabbing something easy, what happens is that we're just grazing through our kitchen all day long, and we're not being mindful about what should I be cooking. And so therefore, we're grabbing things that are quick and fast, which might not be the best things for us. So if you're having problems with overeating or boredom eating or things like that, this might be something that you want to take a look at, is planning your meals out. The other thing is on the survey. So number one, I think the most people said that, like 80% of the folks said that they're eating more than they normally would. 90% of you said that you're not moving as much as you want. And I think that we need to plan that as well, because here's the thing is we are never going to automatically feel like exercising. We're never going to feel like going out and moving. We think that motivation is going to hit us. And so when we rely on motivation for those types of things, we are setting ourselves up for disaster. So you really need to schedule when you're going to be active and then adhere to the schedule. And then number three is your sleep suffers. So again, because we have these more flexible hours, people are going to bed later and they're waking up later. So really be very mindful of your sleep schedule. Wake up on time, go to bed when you're planning it. Okay. And so if you aren't paying attention to your schedule and creating your new routine, what will happen is your self-care really suffers. And so what's happening is that folks are really getting frustrated because their habits are completely out of whack, because they're not in a routine and they're feeling completely out of control. So folks are surprised. And, quite honestly, I even went through this as well. I was doing some emotional eating within those first couple weeks too, that I thought I had this all under control. And, my family, why are they driving me nuts? I can't deal with them. But again, to go back to the motivational triad, what's happening is our brain is trying to keep us safe. It's seeing this global pandemic and it's seeing it as a threat. And so our brain is trying to keep us safe. And so what it does is it reverts to behaviors that we thought we had fixed, that we might have to do some more work on. Okay. And so that's what I had to do. I had to go back to, why am I eating these foods when I don't want them? Okay. And so really paying attention to, like, for example, your hunger signals in that one. Okay. So it's no doubt that when we think about the motivational triad, that those things that are pleasurable, our brain is moving towards. Eating, social media makes it very rewarding to log on. Netflix is right there. You could have any TV show and every movie right in your living room. Sleeping can also be a way of, buffering. Okay. And then also drinking. So all of these things reward the brain's pleasure center with a huge dose of dopamine. And we want to avoid those things that are painful. So doing those things that we don't like exercising. Okay. Or, I don't know, paying bills and doing all of those things. It's easy to hide. Feeling our feelings. We don't want to feel our negative feelings. It's just, we don't want to do it. Okay. And deciding. So making something from scratch or grabbing something that's easy. Okay. And so what I want to introduce you to is the concept of buffering. Okay. And so here's another cartoon. Let me give you a second to read it. So these are all, buffering is just a way that we are avoiding doing things that we don't want to do. Okay. So someone on the survey said that they were doing social more often, but they weren't sure of how much was too much. And so what I want to introduce to you is how we know that too much of something that we're buffering with is too much is that we feel worse afterwards. So I want to give you a couple examples of how I am buffering and how I know that that's happening. So with my eating, I'm noticing that I'm not hungry. I've learned over the years to pay attention to my hunger signals, and I check in with that. So when I find myself reaching for something that I don't really want, I know that I'm defaulting to buffering and not wanting to deal with something, whether it's working or whether it's calling someone or, dealing with a problem or just feeling my feelings. With social, I get mad at my timeline because I've already seen everything that it's showing to me and there's no new stuff. That's when I know that I've been buffering with social media. When Netflix, when I'm watching something that just isn't interesting to me, or with sleeping, when I know that I don't want to get up. Okay, when I feel like I just want to put the covers over my head, I know that I'm buffering with sleeping. Okay, so those are just some examples. And so, as a society, we are constantly bombarded with suggestions on ways to feel pleasure. So, you should eat this, or you should go buy something. You can totally buffer with online shopping. I used to do it when I lived in the States. You should totally do that activity. Okay. And so, what I want to offer to you is that when okay, so we have two different types of emotions, right? We have positive emotions and we have negative emotions. And so when we are buffering, what we're doing is we're avoiding the negative emotions by doing these buffering habits. And we buffer as a way to feel better and to not experience negative emotion. And so, what I want to suggest is that what if life was just 50% positive and 50% negative? And that right now we are just on the negative side of the 50%, and that nothing has gone wrong. See, we like to think that we can cut off the negative emotions, but if you think about emotions as a sine wave, we can only go as far high as we're going low. And I actually tried doing this for much of my life. Before I really dealt with my emotional eating, I was basically flatlined. I used to tell myself that I was reserved or that I wasn't a crier, that I wasn't really emotional. But to be honest, I wasn't feeling any joy either. And so, what happens when we try to cut off the negative emotions is we don't feel positive emotions either. And so, Brene Brown has this amazing quote that we cannot selectively numb emotions. When we numb the painful emotions, like the grief that we're experiencing right now, we also numb the positive ones. So we're going to get more into that in the next secret. But the answer to how do I get motivated again is to start creating a routine. Okay. So really pay attention to your self-care. And you're not going to feel like doing it. Okay. So you are not going to feel motivated to, you know, go exercise or get up in the morning, but it's something that you need to do. And here's why. If we rely on motivation to get us through those things that we don't want to do, motivation is a fickle beast. Motivation is actually a feeling. And so just like joy, sadness, desire, boredom, and confidence, we don't feel it all the time. And yet we think that I'm going to feel motivated to exercise all the time. I'm going to feel motivated to eat healthy foods all the time because I feel that way right now. But know that motivation will come and go. And when we aren't motivated, we need to rely on discipline in order to get us through. So create a schedule and stick to it. Start with your sleep and wake up even if you don't have to. Okay. Plan your eating schedule and what you're going to eat and when. Plan when you're going to exercise or walk, but ease into it. If you're not doing anything right now, start with small amounts. So start with 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Just walk to the end of your driveway and back. Okay. And then also, when you hear me say plan it, I want you to know that I'm also talking about planning your downtime. Make sure that you plan things for enjoyment too. So your self-care, like, taking a bath and putting on good clothes. So those are the types of things that are going to get you out of this funk. Okay. Now, secret number 3 is understand that the solution resides with you. Okay. So now, at this point, I want to talk a little bit more about stress and stress management. Okay. So we know that stress is all about how we think about the world and ourselves in it. And we know that because we know that 2 different people can experience the same exact event and have very different thoughts and feelings about that event. So even right now, there are just there are just as many different perspectives about sheltering in place as there are people who are sheltered in place. Some people don't mind it so much. Some people are saying, well, if this is what I have to do in order to keep my family and friends, safe, then that's what I'll do. Meanwhile, there are other people who are just like, this sucks. I can't manage this. I'm going off the walls. Or there are also people that are like, you know what? I know you told me to shelter in place, but I'm not going to do that. Peace out. So we know that events, how we think about those events, are what actually cause us our stress. And so I'd like to present that there are 2 different ways that we can manage our stress. And we can either do it after the fact, which, when I talked about as a health coach, how I was really struggling with how to help people manage their stress because all of the traditional methods that were out there were all very after the fact for me. But I want to suggest that maybe we can actually prevent stress from happening before it even happens. Okay. And so our after the fact stress management methods are exercising. Now, exercising is kind of both. Okay. So exercise allows me, I know that when I'm feeling anxious, that I feel like I just need to go out and burn off some steam. Okay. And so when I'm using exercise in that manner, I am using exercise as an after the fact. Manicures, massages, and pedicures. Again, those things are fantastic, but I feel like it's a way that we are using those methods to escape from our current life. Same thing with meditation, with baths, and then also with buffering. So those methods that we talked about earlier. So scrolling on social or eating or drinking or sometimes working can even be a way that we're escaping from other issues. So yeah, what if we could manage our stress and even prevent it? What could that look like? So when people talk to me about self-care, I like to think of self-care a little bit differently than most people do. Okay, so you've already obviously heard me talk about how it's not just manicures and massages. But what I think about self care is really thinking about the future versions of ourselves and really thinking about what do I want to do in the future. So, again, going back to that emotional brain versus the rational brain, when we're talking about self care, we're overriding that emotional brain and we're thinking about the rational part of our brain. What do I really want next week, next month, next year? Okay. How am I going to feel later if I eat this food now? How am I going to feel tomorrow? How am I going to exercise? Okay. And these are the types of things that I work with my clients on when they coach with me. Okay. So, not procrastinating, doing what needs to be done now. Okay. And so self care also is not exclusive to women. We think about self care as being very feminine, but it's really not. And so the first step is to understand what it is that you're experiencing and how to take appropriate action or response to that, whatever it is, that circumstance. Okay. So things that help us manage our stress. So I already talked about sleep, okay? But eating will also help us manage our stress. If we're eating foods that are good for us, we will not feel upset, the stomach not feeling upset, which causes us to manage our stress better. Okay. Exercise is also a really amazing way to manage stress. And so I think that historically, we've always thought about exercise as a way to burn calories. And so, if you're someone who doesn't like to exercise, I'd challenge you to think about exercise a little bit differently. As we get older, we really need to start thinking about exercise as a way of managing our stress and not as a way of burning calories, because we have so many people out there right now who just do not have a good relationship with their bodies and therefore their exercise as well. And so if this is you, I would love for you to just tweak how it is that you're looking at exercise and thinking about it as a way to help you with your self-care. Okay. Exercise is a great way to improve your mood. It helps your muscles and your bones. It increases your energy levels. It helps you think better. Okay. So, walking, and yeah, when I'm talking about exercise, I'm not just talking about strength training or cardio, but I'm also just talking about movement in general. Getting in touch with your body, moving, walking, gardening, whatever it is that you need to do to be active, to be off of your tuchus and get onto your feet and move a little bit more. Okay. Self-care is also about focusing on your future. So I already talked about this a little bit, but saying yes to feeling better. And we think, I hear people saying that cheeky stuff all the time that, I know what would feel better. I would feel better if I was eating this pizza. Yeah, well, that's true, but self-care is really more about thinking beyond the pizza, thinking to tomorrow, thinking to next week, thinking to next month or next year, and taking the feeling good now in and trading that for what feels good later. Okay. So when people, I really dislike that analogy of the oxygen mask when people talk about self-care. So you need to put your oxygen mask on first so that you can take care of others. And yes, that is true. But I'd also like to challenge you, if you're thinking that I need to take care of myself so I can take care of my family. I'd like to challenge you that you are effing worth it. You are worth taking care of. And if you have children and your child said to you, Mom or Dad, I'm only taking care of myself so I can take care of these other people, I hope that you would want more for her or him, that you would want your children to take care of themselves because they are amazing, because you are amazing. And so, what I'd like you to do is shift your thinking from self care being more than just massages and manicures, that health habits are more about weight or less about weight loss and more about feeling good, that exercise is more than just burning calories, but is a way of managing your stress. And that sleep is a huge way that you can take care of yourself. And if there's one thing about sheltering in place that I hope is happening right now, is that as a nation, we are catching up on our sleep because we are sleep deprived. Okay. So, I talked about this a little bit ago, but I want to talk about it a little bit more. That our thoughts are actually what are causing us most of our stress. So we think that our events, sheltering in place, the COVID virus, the financial markets, that those things are causing the problem. But in truth, circumstances are completely neutral events. And here's how we know that. Because if the COVID virus were causing the problem, we would have felt this stress back in January or back in December when it was discovered. It wasn't until that virus came here to where you live that all of a sudden it's starting to be a problem. And so I'd like to just challenge you in being open for this section of the webinar that our thoughts are creating a lot of our stress. And so there's something called the model, and it's based off of the work of Byron Katie and Brooke Castillo. And what it is, this is exactly it. We're going to go through it in just a second. But again, the idea is that we have circumstances or events, and those things are completely neutral. So again, when I say neutral, I don't necessarily mean that because negatively about it, that someone else is completely thinking positive thoughts. Okay, and I'll address that in just a second. But that maybe not everyone thinks negatively about them. Okay. So circumstances and events are neutral. And then we have thoughts about our circumstances or events. Okay. And those those thoughts are what are actually creating our feelings. Okay. Our feelings then drive our actions, and then our actions produce our results. Okay. And so, you know, a real live situation is that I was talking to one of my friends not too long ago, and I was checking in on her, asking her if she was okay. And she said to me, I have nothing to look forward to. And my heart just sank because the thought that I have nothing to look forward to creates a feeling of such despair. When we have feelings of despair, we don't do anything to try to get ourselves out of that. We don't wake up in the morning. We don't get dressed. We don't put makeup on. We eat terribly. Okay. We might just sit on the couch and watch endless hours of Netflix. We might scroll social. And so our result is actually a parrot of what we just thought, which is, I have nothing to look forward to. And so the thought model is actually the way that we deal with our 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 world. Okay. All of our problems fit into this thought model. And so, I want to suggest that thought work isn't so once we know how we're thinking and how we're feeling, immediately folks want to change that because we can change our thoughts. Okay. I can think I do have something to live for or something to look forward to, but it's not about changing into, the automatic positive. So it's not just about thinking happy thoughts, okay? But it's not about denying reality. In fact, it's the opposite. It's asking ourselves the question, is what I'm feeling appropriate for our current circumstance? And do I want to be feeling this way? Okay. So the grief that we've all been feeling as part of sheltering in place, that's an appropriate response. We need to be able to feel that. We just don't want to buffer, right? And so it's really interesting to notice how disempowering thoughts keep us stuck in lieu of empowered thoughts. And so that's really the key to doing this thought work, is having more empowered thoughts. So my friend who believes that she has nothing to look forward to, that's a really disempowering thought. And so how can we be a little bit more empowered in our thinking, as opposed to sitting with this where we don't want to do anything? Okay. And so some empowering thoughts are, how do I want to show up in this relationship? What would I do right now if I loved myself? And then how is this happening for me instead of to me? Okay. So I'd like you to really think about those thoughts and feel free to take them. They're yours now. But worrying about what ifs really is not helpful. Okay. And arguing with reality isn't helpful either. And it only adds to the frustration. Okay. Let's see. And so when we can do thought work, what happens is we can separate, we can feel the feeling, and we can pause. So thought work is kind of like a writing meditation. Okay. And so the more that we do it, we can decide what actions we want to take and move forward from there. Because when we have feelings, or when we don't like, I should say, when we don't like how we're acting, whether it's emotionally eating or boredom eating or scrolling on Facebook or buffering, we can decide, we can pause and realize, what am I feeling and what is the story that I'm telling myself about that that's creating my results? And so what thought work does is it allows us to become the watcher. It allows us to pay attention to our brain. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to offer you the idea that we are not our thoughts. We are not our brain. And so we think we are. We think that because I have this idea that, everything is useless, okay, or that I should eat that we have to do it. And we don't. So going back to those two different parts of the brain, the emotional brain is the part that's trying to get us to do things that are against our self-interest. And so being the watcher of that emotional brain will allow us to actually move forward and get the results that we actually want. Okay. So just like we have behavioral habits, we also have mental habits. And by doing thought work, we can interrupt that habit loop and therefore manage our stress better. And so, I would be a total jerk if I told you, or if I let you believe that I had all this handled. Quite like you, I thought I had my habits handled. And then when sheltering in place started, I told you that, I was having problems with my workouts, and I was having problems with getting up on time. And I was also having problems with emotional eating, as well as drinking more alcohol than I would like. And so, be aware that we all revert back to those things that used to make us feel good. And so it's our responsibility to kind of change that. And so I love this analogy. And it is that you are holding a cup of coffee when someone comes along and bumps you and shakes your arm, making you spill your coffee everywhere. Why did you spill your coffee? It's probably because you're like, well, someone bumped into me. But unfortunately, that's the wrong answer. You spilled the coffee because there was coffee in your cup. Had there been tea in your cup, you would have spilled your tea. So whatever is inside your cup is what will spill out. Therefore, when crisis comes along, as it has for all of us, and shakes you, which will happen, which did happen, whatever is inside you will come out. And so it's easy to fake when life is all natural and good, right? When things are humming along and we're in a routine. But until you get rattled, you have to ask yourself, what is in my cup? When life gets tough, what spills over? Is it joy, gratefulness, peace, and humility? Or is it worry, resentment, anxiety, sadness, anger, bitterness, harsh words, and reactions? And so I invite you to think about, how have you been acting, or what are the feelings that you've been feeling over the past few weeks, and do you like them? And so in my quest, I told you I was going to tell you about this, but I haven't yet, is that I made the realization that even though I had my physical health all dialed in, I realized a while ago, about 3 years ago, that my mental attitude really needed a lot of work. And so that's when I started this journey myself, and really getting my brain to the point of feeling grateful for what it is that I have, and really pursuing more of a whole life than I had been living. And so there's a tool, it's on my website, and it's called the Wheel of Life. And what you do is you go through 8 or 10 different sections, and you rate yourself on a scale from 1 to 10. Where are you right now? And where do you want to be? And this will give you a good idea of areas that you will want to improve on. Okay. And you can use thought work to go ahead and do that. And so I'd like to answer you, or ask you a question. So what's next? So I think that information alone, the information that I've given you today, isn't going to help you. So if you don't like how you're showing up for yourself or for your family during this crisis, you don't have to stay here. And I'm going to invite you to get more one-on-one help with all of the topics we talked about. Or if there's something that I haven't talked about that you wrote about in the survey, I would also invite you to, get help with that as well. But you need to act. So I'm going to offer a mini session. And in this mini session, what we're going to do is, it's 30 minutes long. And you are going to, together, we will clarify what it is that you want, identify why you haven't achieved it so far, and help you to move forward, understand why you want to move in this direction, and then develop an action plan. And then I will help you to take action. Okay. So let's see here. I am going to type into the chat box. All right, the link to the, shoot. Okay, the link to the mini session is now in the chat. Okay, you can open that up. And when you click on that link, you'll be brought to this page. Okay. All you need to do is click the button to schedule the call. And what will happen is you will you'll fill in your time zone, you'll schedule your time, and then you'll fill out your questionnaire. Okay. So this is really an opportunity to get one-on-one help with anything that you've been struggling with over the past few weeks. It's an opportunity for you to learn more about thought work. Thought work has truly changed my life. And I feel like it's the missing step in what's not going to help me get cancer like my mom had. I realize all of the thought errors that I was having growing up and all of the wrong beliefs that I had about myself and about how the world worked. I've really embraced more self-love and self-compassion in the process. And it's truly been an amazing experience. And I just want to share it with everyone because it's so cool. All right. So let's see. This is just a testimonial from someone else who's gone through the mini session. Sarah says, this call has just been great. You've given me so much insight to how I've been dealing with my stress and eating for so many years now. And I feel like a veil has been lifted and I can see clearly what's been going on and what I want the future to look like. I'm encouraged to make the changes and how not to feel stuck. Okay. So I want to hear from you. What questions do you have? I want you to tell me. Go ahead and type into the chat if you'd like. Any questions? All right, ladies and gentlemen. Teenagers wreck my food goals. I buy stuff for them to have in the house. Okay. So that's actually a really good, okay. So here's what you need to do, Ryan. I buy stuff for them to have in the house, but then you probably eat it all. So there's a really good technique, which is everyone has their own place where they go to get their food. Okay. So if you don't want to eat food that's there for other people, okay, first of all, I would question why you have to have stuff for them. But the other piece is, so making sure that it's out of sight. So I put things in the freezer all the time. I put things in cabinets so that I can't see them, so that I don't go looking for them. Putting them on lower shelves so that they're not in line of sight. And then also in the refrigerator, putting things in opaque containers versus clear containers will signal to your brain that, because once we see it, then we want it, right? So I would suggest making sure that you have opaque containers and making sure that you can't see it. Okay, good question. What other questions does anyone have? Okay, Jennifer asks, those tricks do not work for me. If I know it's there, I'm going to hunt it down. Any tips for not putting it in the cart to begin with? Yes. So there's a saying that is, make your grocery list hungry, but go shopping when you're satisfied. And so only buying things that are on your list. And if you have something like excuse me, if you have something like Instacart in your area or food on delivery, I've heard from a lot of people, and myself included, that it costs a little bit more, but it's worth it because we're not putting in those impulse items. So if you can go grocery shopping or create your list when you are not hungry, then you will be so much more successful and making a deal with yourself that you are not going to buy anything that's not on your list. Okay. Now, here's the thing is that sometimes we have this expectation that the future versions of ourselves are like perfect. So like, future Elizabeth in 1 week or 2 weeks, like, doesn't have cravings. She doesn't drink alcohol. She eats only vegetables and organic. And so there's this perfectionist future fantasy that we have of ourselves. And the truth is that we need to be able to give ourselves some treats. So one of the things that you can do is make sure that you don't hate yourself in a week by not having anything in the house. Okay. And when you do buy, to not, how do I want to say this? So not buy the bulk stuff. So not buy let's say a thing of chips for 10 servings, but rather buying the smaller individual serving chips. And the reason why is there's a book called Mindless Eating by Brian Wansink. And in it, he talks about the pause factor. And so when we eat ice cream or something like that, we want to buy individual servings, because when we finish that serving, our brain pauses and asks ourselves, like, do we want more? And so it doesn't necessarily prevent you from going and getting more chips or more ice cream or another slice of pizza, but eating directly out of the main container, we don't get that point of pause that makes our brain stop and think, do I want more? Okay. So those are two things for you. So one is when you are buying things to snack on, make sure you portion them individually if they're not already pre-portioned. And number two is making sure that it doesn't go in the cart in the first place. So when you are shopping, making sure that you're full already. Good question. What other questions do you have? I love it. Future Jennifer is not a perfectionist, but is effortlessly thin, fit, and healthy. Current Jennifer is working on the effortless part. Awesome. Yes. So future Jennifer is just 1% better. Every day, you're just getting 1% better than you are today. All right. What other questions do you have for me? I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Okay. All right. Well, if you don't have any more questions, everyone, I loved presenting to you. Have an amazing day. And I will also follow up with an email for you to those different links that I mentioned in the webinar. And I will also send out a replay of the webinar when I get that. So have an amazing day. See y'all later. Bye.